Welcome to another edition of Eye on the Issues, and today we are talking politics as we get ready for the next legislative session in the state of Wyoming. House Revenue Committee member, Representative J.R. Riggins joins us now. Thank you for taking the time to talk, sir. Tell me, what are you most looking forward to in this session?
Well, I'm most looking forward to being able to complete the session, because if you remember last year, I had heart surgery right in the middle of it, right when it started. So looking forward to see a full session in firsthand view. So far as bills and the activities going to be going on, of course, my first budget session. So I've been reading a lot of stuff that makes you really tired at night. Not so much just even the bills, but some of the process. Been catching up on the videos from 2 years ago to see how everything progresses and how short a time you have to visit and talk about bills. You got 2 minutes, and I had to chuckle a little bit at some of that stuff. I never saw people that are customarily getting quite a bit of time to talk on the floor cut off and it done in mid-sentence. So learned a couple of lessons from that. A couple of bills that I think that I expect they're not really budget-related bills, for example, that I expect to get passed because I think is probably necessary, is like the nuclear facility security bill that was in the Minerals Committee. That probably should move forward because that nuclear security is going to be an issue in Kemmer just in a few years, and I think that needs to get passed in this session. I have one bill is all I put forward, and that was having to do with vehicle registrations, lowering the fees, adding some additional years of depreciation for that, and lowering the cost of license plates. And then, of course, we have quite a few bills in revenue that aren't really raising revenue. It's still about property taxes, and we'll see how that goes. Most of them you're already familiar with how they're put together.
Sure.
And
let me ask you quickly, if you don't mind, about the vehicle fees. Many moons ago, I lived in the state of Virginia, and there was like a 5% vehicle fee on the value of your vehicle every year. Tell me a little bit behind what your thought process was in respect to lowering this fee in Wyoming.
Well, it's probably one of the more regressive taxes there are, right? So we decided that as a state, you're gonna charge vehicle registration fees based on the factory price of the vehicle, and then you're gonna depreciate it down. So you depreciate it down to, and I think the first 5 years, 60%, 50, 40, 30, 20, and then you stop. And my opinion is those vehicles are still depreciating out. They go from worth something to worth less. Eventually, where you do the point, you just tow them out of your yards, right? So if we're going to base it on value and depreciation, let's carry it out to its natural conclusion. So I added 2 more years. 6 year, I believe, would be 10%, and then the next year would be 5%, and that would be the bottom. It would take a standard 2002 Suburban, like someone here owns, with a couple 100,000 miles on it. It would go from about $187 a year to about $95 a year.
That's a big difference.
It is a big difference, and had a pretty good sized fiscal note, because that's property tax in effect. I think people think that vehicle registrations are probably for things related to automobiles, roads, anything, patrol, safety, but it's really not. It's considered a property tax, and I think maybe that should change, right? So other states do a little bit differently. Maybe we should consider that. It had about a $29 million fiscal note on it.
Wow.
I was surprised too, but you know what that tells you? That tells you how much money is being collected on people's vehicles.
Sure.
It doesn't matter if you drive them 1 day a week or you drive them every day, right? So, another thing I like to look at on that. Everything is getting more expensive. Insurance. We talk about helping younger people, young couples, and I just think this is the way to do that. You buy a $5,000 vehicle that originally cost $60,000, but being that it has 150,000 miles on it, you're trying to buy something cheap. It's not that cheap. It costs you $25, $30 a month to drive that vehicle, just in license plate. So I think you should look at it at a monthly cost, right? So, it's the only bill. It's got to get to 2/3 like all that. So we'll see if it makes it through. And I have had people ask me about sponsoring that bill, co-sponsoring. But the second question they have when they see the fiscal note, have you thought of a way to make up that revenue? And I have a hard time imagining a way I could give a taxpayer a break on his license plates and then find a way to get that money right back from the same taxpayer. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I know that completely understandable. You mentioned it briefly, but property tax relief, do you see that going anywhere?
Well, if I had my preference, it would just stand pat. Go with it what it is. I know there's probably 8 bills coming out of revenue related to that. Everything from constitutional amendment, making property tax zero. Probably something I would support would be going ahead and removing the sunset date from long-term homeowners. I would probably retain the current 25% where owner occupied are the ones that are allowed to claim that exemption. And that would probably be about a 35% increase in properties that are eligible or not eligible for the 25% off. And so by default, it's probably going to generate about another 30 million plus in property tax revenue for the next year because of that. Something we have to remember the Amendment A that created that class of the residential class of property. Well, nothing is really associated with that. And if you remember that campaign, I mean, you see the colorful flyers and it was saying, vote for Amendment A and your property tax are going to be lowered. Be honest, nothing could happen with it. But there are some bills that kind of address that. And truthfully, I guess technical standpoint is that 0% property tax, I guess, address it. There's also another bill that I'm a little bit more favorable towards is reducing that percentage to 8.3 from 9.5. And there's some reasons for that. There's a constitutional spread you can have. And I would probably support that measure because that is something related to Amendment A. I think voters would be wondering, but whatever happened to that if you didn't do anything, right? So, and there's some other bills that are being considered, but for me, those 3 or 4 are about as far as I want to go. The assessors just kind of got a handle on how to handle last year's stuff. I don't really want to throw them another curveball and make them scramble again. So
understood. In 2025, the Wyoming Liberty Group came out with a report called "Balancing the Scales," and it talks about money and it talks about energy and revenue from energy. I'm going to read you the key points of if I can briefly. Oil, gas, and coal currently face a disproportionately high tax burden relative to renewable energy sources. And then it goes on to say by 2030, this study estimates that Wyoming will lose $171 million of its $1.4 billion in 2025 fossil fuel tax revenues. That's a loss of 12.5% if taxes on wind, coal, gas, and oil are held at their current rates. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we have a bill related to that electrical generation. So there is a bill out there that we threw solar in with the wind. And we also did a little bit of change to the one on nuclear energy. If you remember, there was a bill that has $5 per megawatt on nuclear energy. Of course, it's not being applied. We went ahead and moved nuclear generation into that same category and at that same dollar amount. We kept all the 3 years and stuff all on that. I read that report and remember we looked a little bit at gross receipts tax on electrical generation. It was a bill, I think, by Senator Case a couple of years ago. I looked at that, and by the time they had all the exemptions, I mean, you had to exempt all the other taxes paid. And to me, it looked like a wash. So if you look at the numbers on wind turbines, they are going to generate a little more tax revenue here going forward. I think 3 or 4 of those wind turbine farms lose their exemptions. And then, of course, that great big one over there by Carbon County is about 3,000 megawatts. It'll generate about 3 million a year on its own once it's not exempt from the taxation. And I figure in about 4 years, there's probably going to be, maybe 14 million, 15 million in megawatt tax on that. And we also have one of the big deals. We didn't want to have those charges going on Wyoming customers, right? So we found records and we've kind of confirmed, because we actually have records from the Public Service Commission with Rocky Mountain Power. And it's absolutely that $1 megawatt is not going, maybe about $330,000 of that is being paid by Wyoming companies, probably people who volunteered to have green energy on their portfolio. But the rest of it was going to Utah, Oregon, Idaho, surprisingly. I don't know if they know that. But I can tell you that one that's over by Rollins, pretty much 100% of that is going to go to California. And currently right now, California does not buy that, hardly any from us. But that'll change it. And so it's not going to come anywhere close to making it level. But we're actually going to start seeing a little more real revenue that at least you can see on a ledger, right?
Sure.
Maybe
sure.
with property tax, that might be a total of $30-40 million with their property tax tied up with that too. So it's something. It's not nothing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Doesn't mean that I'm all excited about building more.
Right. Well, I did an interview not that long ago regarding wind turbines and solar panels, and I interviewed a guy that did a report card nationally on what states are actually prepared to handle those when their lifespan is over. And I thought that was a really interesting thing, because you've got these wind turbines, they have a limited amount of lifespan. You've got solar panels, same thing. I mean, it could be a shorter lifespan if they get hit with a storm and a bunch of hail. And then, what are you going to do with all that stuff when it's useless?
Yeah. Remember, if last year I also had about one bill, and it was a wind turbine blade disposal act, and that got some people's attention when I suggested they could bury them on the property for which they're set. And it wasn't the only thing they could do with them. Actually, and I was very happy with it. It got a lot of attention, even though it got tabled. But you're right.
People don't think about that stuff right now.
Nope. And you wonder long term, and I've seen some of this now, how long will those towers last? How long will they be able to just go ahead and set a new generator on them, right?
Right.
Maybe quite a while. I don't know. I know that they do repurpose them now for at least one switch out. And I would think that those are going to get a little more efficient. They'll probably generate a little more electricity, even with the same tower down the road. And that'll help a little bit. They won't be exempt because, well, I don't think they'll be exempt just because they put new generators on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? You have to look a little more detail. But you're right. Eventually, the solid waste, I'm not done thinking about that. The industrial siting plan for these, if you type industrial or solid waste in that 100-page document, it only pops up in a reference to the EPA. I don't know if there's actually I think they should all have a solid waste disposal plan as part of their siting requirement. Have to have it. You just tell us what you're going to do with it. Now, in the end, we're going to get a good, we're going to see an example of that when they get rid of the 11 turbines here just outside of Casper that they've announced they're going to go ahead and remove. So we'll see.
How soon? Do we know how soon?
I would not say any sooner than 2 years would be my guess. I think it seems like I heard something about 3 years and it should be done. I'll be curious what it looks like and what they do with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're saying that thought process and that philosophy, this same thought process probably should have been put in play when the whole nuclear energy industry went into play, because there's still nuclear waste here, there, and everywhere near a nuclear facility, in this country.
Well, and there was a little bit of talk, I think casual conversation about what could these companies done better? What could Irradiant done better? Probably should have been really working on trying to pass that legislation before anybody tried anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was surprised with some of the people that I visited with. It's funny, they all say, I'm for nuclear power, but none of them say they want to handle the spent fuel when it's all done, right?
Right.
So
right.
It's impossible to have one without the other. We are going to have spent fuel in Cameron, you know? So I told people that it didn't really matter if you generated 1 megawatt or 1 gigawatt. If there is a single rod of spent fuel, you can expect it to be stored at that facility temporarily for not less than 40 years. And we really should expect 80 years of storage. Because even if they build a repository, we're last on the list to get something taken to it. You got 60 years of spent fuel rods to store, and it'll be a long time. You should probably even expect 100 years, right? Because how many loads of that could you haul across interstate highways? Even if you plan it all, what, 30 loads a year, 40 loads a year, and you have 25,000 loads you need to move?
Yeah.
That's going to be a long time.
So we're talking decades without question.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. I don't want to take much more of your time, but so is there anything I'm not asking you about this upcoming session that you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to see what the budgets actually look like when you get all done, because there's still about 8 rounds of negotiation to go in there. For example, I know that they had the 25 per student class size, right? And then I know later on that same week, they reduced it to 18, which got me to thinking, so what if you have an elementary school that you've based that class size on 25, and you've set your classrooms up for 25, and you got enrollment based on 25, and if they make it 18, and I don't have any extra classrooms, do I got to boot a bunch of people out of the school that have just enrolled? And especially if I can't hire any let's say I have extra classrooms, but I don't have an extra 3rd grade teacher.
Right.
So I look at it as a little bit of an unintended consequence for a school that I was just at the other day visiting, and they have it based on 25 kids.
Right.
So now I need to go up there and have a visit with them. Is this going to lower your enrollment because of that?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't hear anybody at that school really complaining about 25 kids. I think that was how I talked to a few teachers and the principal, and no, that's what they were planning to do, right? So we'll see if what that kind of has an impact. Does that affect enrollment?
Yeah.
For specific schools? So that's something I'm concerned about, and we'll just see how it all plays out.
Right. Well, okay. Well, hopefully we can continue this discussion a couple weeks or a couple months down the road following this session and see how it goes. Representative Riggins, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being on Eye on the Issues. Folks out there in Wyoming, if you want to find out more what's going on around your state, just go to wyliberty.org and sign up for our newsletter. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Thank you.